The mid-18th century found the Indian subcontinent in a state of profound transition. The once mighty Mughal Empire was fracturing, its authority waning across distant provinces. Into this power vacuum stepped various European trading companies, each vying for influence and control. Among them, the British East India Company was rapidly becoming the most formidable. In Bengal, one of the richest provinces, tensions were simmering to a boil. The young and impulsive Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, ascended to the throne in 1756. He was deeply suspicious of the British and their expanding military presence. The company's officials were widely misusing trade permits, known as dastaks, for personal gain. This practice severely undercut the Nawab's tax revenues, angering him greatly. Furthermore, the British began strengthening the fortifications around Fort William in Calcutta without permission. Siraj-ud-Dowlah saw this as a direct challenge to his sovereignty and ordered the construction to cease. The British, confident in their position, refused to comply. The final straw was the company granting asylum to a political fugitive who had embezzled funds from the Nawab's court. Enraged by this series of provocations, Siraj-ud-Dowlah decided to act decisively. He amassed his army and marched on the British settlement of Calcutta. The city fell quickly to the Nawab's overwhelming forces in June 1756. Following the surrender, a number of British prisoners were confined in a small guardroom. This incident would become infamously known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. Though the details are debated, the story of the tragedy galvanized British public opinion. It provided a powerful pretext for a military response against the Nawab. From Madras, the East India Company dispatched an expeditionary force to retake Calcutta. This force was under the command of the ambitious and determined Lieutenant Colonel Robert Clive. Clive was a man of immense talent and questionable scruples. His arrival in Bengal marked a dramatic escalation of the conflict. Clive's forces successfully recaptured Calcutta in early 1757. However, his objective was not merely to restore the company's prior status. He sought to replace Siraj-ud-Dowlah with a ruler who would be compliant to British interests. Clive began to secretly search for a candidate within the Nawab's own court. He found his man in Mir Jafar, one of the Nawab's most powerful generals. Mir Jafar was the commander-in-chief of the army, but felt sidelined by the young Nawab. He harbored ambitions to seize the throne for himself. A secret correspondence began between Clive and the disgruntled general. The wealthy and influential Jagat Seth banking family also joined the conspiracy. They feared the Nawab's unpredictable nature and sought stability for their commercial interests. Clandestine treaty was drafted and agreed upon. Mir Jafar promised to betray his Nawab on the battlefield. In return, Clive would ensure he was installed as the new Nawab of Bengal. The plot was a masterpiece of political intrigue and treachery. With the conspiracy in place, Clive manufactured a pretext to march his army against the Nawab. His small force, numbering around 3,000 men, was a mix of British soldiers and Indian sepoys. The Nawab, aware of the approaching British, gathered his own massive army of nearly 50,000. He was confident that his superior numbers would guarantee victory. He was tragically unaware of the betrayal festering within his own command. The two armies finally met on June 23, 1757, near the village of Plassey. The battlefield was a large mango grove on the banks of the Bhagirathi Holy River. Clive's army took up a defensive position within the grove, protected by its trees and banks. The Nawab's army, a spectacular sea of color and steel, arranged itself in a vast crescent formation. The battle began with a cannonade from the Nawab's French artillery contingent. The British artillery, smaller in number but more efficiently served, returned fire. For several hours, the two sides exchanged cannon fire with little effect. Then, around noon, the sky opened up with a torrential monsoon downpour. The British troops, anticipating the rain, quickly covered their gunpowder with tarpaulins. The Nawab's army, lacking such discipline, failed to protect their ammunition. Their gunpowder was soaked and rendered useless. Thinking the British cannons were similarly silenced, the Nawab's cavalry charged forward. They were met with a devastating volley of British grape shot and musket fire. The charge faltered, and the cavalry retreated in confusion. At this critical juncture, the betrayal began to unfold. The large portion of the army under Mir Jafar's command remained stationary. They refused to advance and engage the British forces. Another commander, Rai Durlap, also held his troops back as part of the conspiracy. Siraj-ud-Dawla, seeing his main forces not moving, was struck with panic. He pleaded with Mir Jafar to save him, but the general offered only cold advice to retreat. Fearing the worst, Siraj-ud-Dawla fled the battlefield on a camel. His departure caused the remainder of his loyal troops to break and run. The battle had turned into a rout. Clive's small army had achieved a stunning and decisive victory. The British casualties were incredibly light, numbering only a few dozen. The Nawab's army, despite its size, had lost around 500 men. The Battle of Plassey was over in a matter of hours. It was less a true battle and more a transaction secured by treachery. In the aftermath, Clive formally recognized Mir Jafar as the new Nawab of Bengal. Siraj-ud-Dawla, the fugitive, was captured a few days later. He was executed shortly thereafter, under the orders of Mir Jafar's son. Mir Jafar, now a puppet ruler, was forced to pay an enormous price for his throne. The East India Company and its officials received vast sums of money and land. Clive himself received a personal fortune, making him one of the richest men in England. The company was granted undisputed rights to trade freely without taxation. The victory at Plassey effectively handed control of Bengal's immense wealth to the British. This wealth would fuel the company's military expansion across the rest of India. It transformed the East India Company from a mere trading body into a de facto sovereign power. The Battle of Plassey was the beginning of the end for native rule in India. It laid the foundation for nearly 2 centuries of British colonial administration. Economic exploitation that followed led to the impoverishment of the once prosperous region of Bengal. Local industries declined as British goods flooded the market. The battle is remembered not for the fighting, but for the conspiracy that decided its outcome. It was a turning point that irrevocably altered the course of Indian history. The sun had set on the Mughal era in Bengal. A new, foreign power had risen to take its place. The political landscape of India was forever changed by the events of that rainy day. The name Plassey became synonymous with British conquest and Indian betrayal. The company's grip on the subcontinent would only tighten in the decades to come. The wealth of an empire was built upon the foundation laid in that mango grove. Mir Jafar's reign was short and troubled, a pawn in a game he did not control. He soon realized the true cost of his ambition. The British replaced him when he could no longer meet their exorbitant demands. The cycle of puppet rulers continued for some time. But the real power remained firmly in the hands of the East India Company. The conquest of Bengal was the first major step towards the creation of the British Raj. Clive returned to England a hero, but his legacy remained controversial. He was both celebrated for his victory and condemned for his methods. The story of Plassey serves as a stark reminder of how small events can have vast consequences. It was a day of rain, betrayal, and the birth of an empire. The echoes of that battle would resonate through Indian history for generations. The fate of millions was decided by a handful of men in a mango grove. Nawab's magnificent war elephants were of no use against cunning and conspiracy. The French contingent fought bravely but were too few to change the outcome. Their cannons fell silent as their allies deserted the field. The river flowed silently by, a neutral witness to the day's treachery. Clive had gambled everything on Mir Jafar's promise. The gamble paid off more handsomely than he could have ever imagined. For India, it was the beginning of a long and painful period of subjugation. The vibrant trade of Bengal was now siphoned for the benefit of a foreign power. The weavers and artisans of Bengal faced a slow decline. The balance of power in the world was subtly shifting. The Industrial Revolution in Britain would be partly financed by the wealth of Bengal. The story began with a dispute over taxes and fortifications. It ended with the subjugation of a kingdom. The Nawab's court, once a center of culture, became a place of intrigue and fear. The British residency grew in power and influence. The company's flag flew higher than the Nawab's. Battle itself was an anticlimax. The real conflict was fought in secret meetings and through coded letters. The loyalty of an army was bought and sold. The future of a subcontinent was decided by this transaction. The monsoon rains washed away the blood, but not the betrayal. The mango grove of Plassey became a silent monument to a turning point in history. The British had come to trade, but stayed to rule. The conquest was as much financial and political as it was military. Nawab's authority evaporated in a single afternoon. The age of company rule in India had truly begun.